People get their kicks stomping on a dream, but I don't let it get me down. 'Cause this fine old world, it keeps spinning around.
And once again, it's your host, Gabe Morales with Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians. Today I have a very special guest. I've heard about him over the years through my mentor, Robert Morel, which I've done a show on and mentioned him several times during some of my videos on the Mexican Mafia. And we're going to talk with an individual who was with him on a very fateful night that changed both of their lives forever. He has a very interesting story himself, a long, illustrious career. He worked in law enforcement for over 50 years. Please welcome Joe Delia to the show. Joe, how are you today?
Good. How are you, Gabe?
All right. Thank you for coming on the show and talking about some of this stuff. I think it's very important for people to get the real story because there's a lot of rumors out there about the traffic stop. Joe, where are you born and raised?
I was raised in East LA, and I was born in Glendale, but moved to East Los Angeles, so basically East LA.
Okay. Did you go to high school there?
Went to Montebello.
Montebello. And so then when you're growing up, did you see any gangs there in the area? Did you have any family members involved in criminal groups?
Yeah, I had an uncle, Mike Delia, Sr., that was involved with gangs at that time, I believe, because the people that he ran with it was the Italian Mafia.
Italian Mafia. Cosa Nostra. Interesting.
When I was young, he was very good to me until after that traffic stop, and that changed a lot of things. See, my dad was working all the time. He worked in the racetrack, and he was a bartender, and he used to travel around with the different tracks. Like Santa Anita would work so long, and then Hollywood Park would work so long, and then Del Mar. So my real mother passed away when I was a year old. She had breast cancer. So my dad gave me basically to my aunt, Roseanne, and then my grandmother. So I was raised by those two. And then she got married when I was about 10, and then she moved away. So if I had to go anywhere, my grandmother never drove. So my Uncle Mike used to come over and bring groceries and take us to the store, yada, yada. And then Mickey, he was like my brother. We were very, very close growing up.
Mickey mean his son, Mike Delia Jr.?
Right. So he was very, very close to me. We both were altar boys at East Los Angeles at a place called St. Alphonsus Church. And Mickey, more than me, took care of Father O'Dow. He was a blind priest. And Mickey, as a kid, was much better than I was. I mean, I got in trouble and this and that. Nothing legally, but I just got in fights all the time. Mickey and I were so close that they used to call us the Delia brothers. Try to take care of each other until we went to high school.
And so then what did you do after high school?
Joined the draft. I got mad at my grandmother and I joined the draft, which is 2 years. And I was a medic and I went all over as a medic. I went to Fort Sam, went overseas, and then came back and worked in the dispensary after I got out from being hurt during the Vietnam War. I didn't like the military. And then I ended up getting out, and I always wanted to be a cop. Matter of fact, when I was 14 years old, I went to East LA Station, and I talked to a couple deputies, and I said, I want to be a cop someday. And one guy said, yes, it's really good. Another guy said, you don't want to get into that type of cop work. I always wanted to be a cop since I was 14 years old.
What agency did you sign on with first?
Monterey Park. That was 1968, I think, 67. I started as a reserve and then I went regular.
And what kind of assignments did you have there at Monterey Park?
I worked patrol. I worked traffic car. I did undercover detective stuff where we followed burglary suspects.
As I stated at the opening, I've spoken with Robert Morel, who also worked there at Monterey Park PD with you for many years, about the traffic stop. In fact, I helped him write his books on that incident and his interactions with Mexican Mafia members. Just so our viewers know, the individuals we're talking about here, Mike Delia Jr., known as Mickey, as well as Alfie Sosa and Armando Mundi Varela, were all members of the Mexican Mafia. I've heard his story. Some of our viewers have heard his story and read his books, but I'd like to hear from you, Joe. What happened that night? Can you give us kind of a play-by-play action? What happened and how did all these rumors start about how you and Mokel were corrupt cops and just had your names thrown through the mud? What exactly happened in your own words from your experience that night?
Okay. I was working patrol in uniform and I was assigned to the traffic unit. And that night, a lot of things occurred. I go home and a guy we called JW, John Wood, he met me there to eat. Well, I was kind of a kibitzer during the police department, so I went to the bathroom and I all the keys are the same for police cars. And I actually parked his car around the corner so he'd come out and think somebody stole his car. And he also testified on all this stuff, also what happened. So I think I went to work at 3 o'clock, if I could remember, 3:30, and I think we were going to work till 11 or 12 o'clock. So I go ahead and I wrote like 6 or 7 tickets all over the city. And this one night, this car pulls in front of me as it's going into a driveway. So I put on the red lights and I stop the person. There was 2 people, and the driver gets out of the car and approaches me. And I noticed that the passenger was trying to get over to my passenger side. And it was dark at that time. So I asked the guy for a driver's license, and I can't remember if he gave me a driver's license. He may have, may not. But when he got out of the car real quick and he went into the garage, and that's when they both came out. And he slammed the garage door down. So he walks back to my car because I didn't know what I had at the time, and I just wanted to have some barrier in my car there in case something happened. That's from past training and everything. So I ask him his name. He tells me his name is Alfie Sosa. And the other guy really wasn't talking, but he kept moving over like he wanted to get around my passenger side of my car, and I kept directing him over. Well, I asked for code 4 able at Monterey Park at that time. That means no hurry, but if there's a car unit nearby, come and stop and check on me. Once the backup comes, I had in my mind that I was going to go into the car, because the reason is he slammed that garage door down and walked to me. And I thought, normally if somebody living here, they would just walk back to you. But he closed the garage, made me suspicious what's in that car. So Moko pulls up. He's in a white car. He was working ABC. And I said, Moko, will you please watch these 2 guys? I'm going to go inside the garage and see what this guy has in his car. So I go in. As I'm opening the garage, Sosa says, you can't open the garage without a search warrant. And I told him, fuck him and a search warrant. So I went in, and as I'm right to the passenger door, I look down and I see a butt of looked like a handgun underneath the front seat. As I open the door, there's a bottle of beer there also. And I'm thinking, man, this guy just worried about a beer. And I'm going to see, it looked like a butt of a gun. And as I reach down, it's a butt of a gun. It was, I don't know if it was a Colt or 38, but it was at least a 4-inch, maybe 6. But I get it and I stick it in my waist, and I notice that there's a bandana there. So in my mind, I'm thinking these guys just came back from a robbery or something. So as I go out, I told the one guy, bite the concrete, asshole, get on the ground, both of you guys. So I go over to Moko and I said, because I only carried 1 pair of handcuffs at that time. Later we have 2, but that time I had just 1. And Moko says to me, whispers, he says, I don't have any handcuffs. Matter of fact, I don't have a gun. Well, you got to know Moko. You know Moko. I mean, Moko's Moko. And if he works undercover and he's working ABC, he never carries a gun. The entire station used to laugh at him because he didn't carry his gun. When he did, he had this big 45 with these real pretty grips that I think he got from somebody in Mexico. So I said, well, we got to call another unit. So I call, and a guy by the name of Dave Morosco, he acts up on the radio, and I said, come over here. I need you for a minute. So he comes over, and I said, I need a pair of handcuffs. He said, you guys don't have handcuffs? I said, well, I got 1 pair, and it's on the passenger. I need a pair for Sosa. So he gives it to him. And we put them, and then we called another car, I believe, because we wanted to keep these guys separated. And I'm doing we call it a 28 check. I'm checking on the car inside the garage because we have to call a tow truck, and I called a tow truck to come over. We're going to take that car because we think if it's a robbery, we're going to take the car also. So when the tow truck arrives, I hear Moko talking to somebody, and I look over, and it's my cousin, Mickey. And I'm shocked. He's shocked. And he asked what I'm doing here. And I said, we're storing this car. And the information on the car had not come back yet. In those days, 77, we didn't have like we have today. It comes back immediate. And we didn't have no MDT or MDC in our cars. So Mickey says, "Why are you taking my car?" And my nickname was Joji. That's what he used to call me. And I said, "We're taking the car because you two guys are probably involved in robbery, and I'm not so sure where you're at." And he starts chipping at us, and Moko said, "Keep that shit up. You're going to jail too." So he says, "Okay, I'm going to sue you guys. I'm going to call my attorney, yada, yada, yada." So he goes inside the house. My whole mind at that time is I knew Mickey was a criminal, but I hadn't seen him since about 1974, 75, when my aunt passed away. I saw him at the funeral, talked to him briefly. So at that point, I go back to the station, write the report, and the next day, I get a phone call in the morning from Captain Collins, and Collins says, "You got to come in, you got to hear this." So evidently what happened is Varela, who was the passenger in the car, Sosa told him he's going to have to kill his wife too, because she knows too much about the Get Going project and the money that's coming in from the state, from Mario Blado's group. And then he also says that Sosa told me to kill the cop. And that's why he was going around the side to shoot me. And I think to myself, why would they want to kill me right there on the street, this and that? They could have just, bullshitted me or did something, maybe got away. But that's what Collins said. I wasn't privy to that part of the interview. So Moko goes back. I don't go, but Moko goes back to the house because Varela said he threw the gun. When Moko showed up, he threw the gun over his shoulder. So they go out, check the house, and they don't find anything. A time later, and I don't know what the period of time was, a gardener called, maybe after Mickey moved out or he went to jail also, but said he found a gun in the tree. So that's the gun that Varela, nobody ever looked up, I guess. They all looked around the yard and stuff like that. So later, Mickey gets arrested. He goes to jail. And according to Collins or Moko, they were going back to that house to actually kill Mickey. They were going to kill Mickey. They were going to kill his new girlfriend. And they were going to kill the little boy that was there who was 10 or 11 years old. Maybe 2 or 3 days later, before Mickey's arrested, I'm sent back there with Mike Barrett Healy. He's retired DEA. And I talked to Mickey and I asked him what's going on. He says, "Oh, nothing." Funny thing, on the way over there, I hear on the radio that in Lancaster, a body's found. And I thought, boy, that's strange. That was the same day that my stepmother calls me. Now, we had a fairly big ranch out there. And I guess there was a body found out there, a guy named Trujillo. And I talked to Mickey and I threw it out. I said, "Mickey, did you guys kill somebody and drive them all the way out to Lancaster to dump them? Because it's really stupid. You dumped them on the family's property." And his eyes got real big. We later find out that, yes, he did. That was a guy named Trio, another guy that's part of the Mexican Mafia, Laeme. Mickey leaves school. Short time later, he's involved in a Bank of America robbery. Then I knew, stay away from him. So he never came around. If he did, it was during the holidays and stuff like that.
Just family occasions, Christmas, Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Hello, how are you? That kind of thing.
And I remember one day that he was there, I tried to talk to him. And he said, "Joji, you're either with me or you're not with me." And I said, "I'm not doing no criminal. I'm going to be a cop someday. I'm not going to do no criminal stuff. I want no part of that." So one day, my grandfather passes away. Well, just before he died, I went there. And I think $30,000 or $40,000, the family knew where the money was, up in the attic in a suitcase. And my Mickey was actually living there at the time because my aunt wouldn't let him live where I lived because we all knew that he's involved in some shady stuff. But he could go to Grandpa's because Grandpa had nothing to do with him. And so one night, my grandfather called and said, "I'm missing my check, his Social Security check." So we went over there and we're looking around his room. Mickey wasn't there. And I pulled up the mattress and there's his check and all kinds of signatures that he was trying to make the same signature as my grandfather. So he got thrown out of there. So When I'm in high school one day, a bunch of his buddy walks by or drives by. They stop, they honk, they tell me to come over. So I went over to Mickey and he said to me, he says, "Hey, this is your chance to come with us." And I said, "I want no part of it. You robbed from my grandfather. He's your grandfather. You're a piece of shit." At that time, three of the guys came out and they beat the dog shit out of me and they left me in the alley there. So at that time, I was really, really pissed off at him. The next time I see him is at my aunt's funeral. So we just had a brief conversation. How you doing in that? That was 74, 75. 1977 is the traffic stop.
Very interesting. Yes, what happened there. So after the traffic stop, I understand that you and Robert Mokel Morrell, your fellow law enforcement officer there with Monterey Park PD, were accused of wrongdoing. Is that correct? Were you guys, I can't recall. Were
This
you
is what
put on
happened.
trial? Were there some allegations
Only
of
no.
misconduct? What happened there?
What happened was there was a guy at the station that said he gave me a teletype. Okay. This guy was one of my best friends. He hated the chief, Chief Elder at Monterey Park. First of all, Monterey Park is probably the best department, one of the best departments I ever been around. It was wonderful. The chief was wonderful there. Well, matter of fact, all the chiefs were good. They had Warner was there, who was a wonderful man, and then Elder. Elder was top notch. Elder was a friend of mine. This person hated him. So he knew that this was going to be a big case, so he wanted to be a part of it. So he says that I ended up getting a teletype. I didn't see no teletype. I never saw a teletype. So a big IA started, internal investigation, where they wrote like 2 or 3 big books, red books. And I gave those to Moko, and I don't know what happened to him, but big investigation. There's grand juries hearings because of the allegations. We never were charged with anything, but we had to testify in the grand jury. Sacramento, we testified up there, and Mickey was there. All 3 suspects. I think this was their trial. We testified there. And because that one guy who was my friend the night before borrows $50 from me, and he said, I said, "What do you need $50 for?" And we don't make that much money in those days. He says, "I'll give it back to you." So I give him $50. There was a rumor going around that somebody was going to testify that we had a teletype and we were staked on the location. And I want to say staked. That means you're at the location and when you have a stakeout, you guys don't leave. You're there. So what happens is we testified. And then I went to Elder and I says, "Hey, did you show him my tickets?" He says, "No, because I want to see what other assholes we have at the station." And what happened was it broke the station up. People were friends of these people, didn't like the chief, and then people that were either for me or against me and Moko. So I said, "Elder, you got to show those tickets." And he says, "Well, I will. I just want to see what other people are going to cause problems within our department." And he did. There was a few people that popped up.
So let me get this correct. There were people there within the department and outside the department that were saying that you two got a teletype and a heads up that this was going to go down. 3 individuals actually were involved in these Mexican Mafia crimes and that you were in on a stakeout, but yet at the same time, Robert Mocha Morrell was doing ABC alcohol beverage control checks unarmed, without any handcuffs, without any backup both of you guys would have had on a major stakeout of 3 Mexican Mafia killers. It doesn't make sense to me, but tried to make sense out of it, didn't they?
Yeah.
They lied.
Another thing to me, if they would have came to me and they would have said, "You're going to stake your cousin's place out," I wouldn't do it. Plus, they wouldn't ask me to stake out a relative. You understand what I'm saying?
Conflict of interest.
Be a conflict of interest.
I don't understand why anybody in the right mind would go in with no backup if they knew what these guys were about. It just doesn't make sense to me. But I know that it definitely totally changed your life, Moko's life, your careers. He said the same thing. He wished that it never happened. Something haunted him for the rest of his life. And I know both of you guys, Joe. I know you and Moko, and just I feel neither one of you guys have anything to be ashamed about. Both of you guys worked over 50 years in law enforcement. Oh, which was another thing I was going to bring up. People said after that incident that both you and Mokel were washed up. You were done for in law enforcement and basically blacklisted, and even worse things than that. Well, what happened after you left Monterey Park?
I went to LA Sheriff as a deputy. And just to prove this, some cops, if you're a good cop, you're going to investigate. You're not going to go off of rumors. First of all, since 1979, I have a company where we do lie detectors all over the country. I've got 8 people that are contractors that work for me. After all this, I went to LA Sheriff. LA Sheriff does backgrounds. They knew all about this, and they still hired me. So not only did I do one, we went through a big investigation at Sacramento, the DA's office. And when Elder finally showed them all the citations, they said, there's no bill, there's no problems with these guys. Then Garcetti starts up one down here in Los Angeles. So we go through another investigation. He sees the tickets, the grand jury, they said, it's good. They hear several people testified. I went home for lunch, that night. I hid this guy's car around the corner as a joke. I went to another guy's house to go to the bathroom because I don't like going bathroom out in public where I have my gun on and stuff like that. And after that, it was fine again. So, and just to prove, I'm retired, says honorably retired from LA Sheriff, and I have an ID card here. I'm also retired from Monterey Park Police. And if you did things wrong, they would fire your ass.
So there you are, folks. Saw proof of it right there. These guys went out. Unfortunately, people tried to throw some shade at them. They tried to blackball them. However, Joe retired with LA Sheriff's Department honorably, and Robert Morel went on to Texas, where he became a very successful, one of the top 5 gang investigators in the state of Texas. And I've spoken to many people out there who know that he was very much loved and was a great investigator on the Texas Mexican Mafia, just as he was a great investigator with the California Mexican Mafia and the founder of the California Prison Gang Task Force.
So all the heat that came down, I wish I never worked that night. But they were convicted, and Mickey only did 5 years, I think. And Varela died, I think, not too long after going to jail. He was a stone alcoholic and drugs, and Sosa lived a long time.
Thank you, Joe, for explaining your story. Okay, all right, Joe. See you soon, brother. All right, take care. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Stomping on a dream, but I don't let it get me down. 'Cause this fine old world